Welcome! This series of tutorials aims to inform diagnostic laboratories about the new regulation on in vitro diagnostic medical devices, the IVDR. Please note that the implementation of the IVDR is an ongoing process and many aspects remain to be clarified. This means that new information will become available continuously. Please visit the ESLO website for more information. 2. IVDR structure and transition timeline. The regulation for in vitro diagnostic medical devices, the IVDR, is 157 pages, so if you want to read it, it is good to understand a bit of the structure of the document, as this helps with focusing on the relevant articles. The IVDR is structured into 3 parts. The first part, with the preambles, describes the intentions, the why of the regulation. Then there's the central part, the chapters, that describe the requirements, the what. So, what do the manufacturers, labs, and others have to do? For example, Chapter 4 on requirements that notified bodies need to meet, Chapter 5 on classification of IVDs and the conformity assessment process, Chapter 6 on clinical evidence and performance evaluation, and Chapter 7 on post-market surveillance, vigilance, and market surveillance. And finally, there is a number of annexes that explain how to fulfill these requirements, the how, with more details and a useful structure. To give an example, let's have a look at the most relevant parts of the IVDR for diagnostic labs concerning their in-house devices. The why, preamble 28 and 29, state that to ensure health protection, the rules for the use of in-house devices are strengthened. In-house devices should only be used when no appropriate CE IVDs are available. And it is also stated that not all of the IVDR requirements should apply to in-house devices. The what, the conditions and requirements for in-house devices are set out in Article 5.5 in Chapter 2 of the IVDR. Article 5.5 lists a number of conditions for diagnostic labs that use in-house devices, which we will look into in the next video. This article also states that the requirements of the IVDR do not apply to in-house devices, with the exception of the general safety and performance requirements listed in Annex 1. The how, so here we can focus on Annex 1. The general safety and performance requirements include important rules for example, risk management and for providing clinical evidence to show that your device works as intended. Here you see an implementation timeline of the IVDR. The old directive, the IVDD, will apply until 2022, with only a few exceptions. A grace period for IVDs with a certificate from a notified body until 2024, and a sell-off period until 2025. The IVDR entered into force in 2017 and will fully apply next year, in 2022. To understand what is happening during this 5-year period, let's have a look at what the main actors, manufacturers, notified bodies, and the authorities have been doing. After the new regulation was published, manufacturers first had to look into what this new regulation means for them, as the IVDR is a major update for them compared to the directive. They had to perform an analysis of what to do on top of what they already were doing, to show that their devices work as intended, and what else to do in order to fulfill all the requirements of the legislation. At this moment, they are busy filling this gap and generating all the required documentation. If necessary, they are setting up performance studies to collect more clinical evidence. A number of manufacturers have already started with submitting files to their notified bodies for review. Others are still trying to engage with the notified body. Then the notified bodies. There is one IVDR requirement that has a huge impact on their work. Under the IVDD, only a small selection of high-risk devices needed to be reviewed by notified bodies, but under the IVDR, most devices will have to be reviewed by a notified body. Therefore, the workload for notified bodies will increase substantially. So, notified bodies have been busy recruiting and educating personnel, trying to make sure they have sufficient people with the right knowledge and expertise. Also, they've been working on receiving their accreditation to work under the IVDR, which is quite a trajectory, and some of them have already been accredited to work under the IVDR. At this moment, this is true for 6 notified bodies. These notified bodies have started to assess the IVD files submitted by IVD manufacturers. A small number have already received the CE mark under the IVDR. In the beginning of 2021, this was true for a few hundred IVDs. In the meantime, the European Commission and the national competent authorities are working hard on the required infrastructure. For example, during the review of Class D devices, the highest risk devices under the IVDR, European reference laboratories and expert panels are involved. These are being set up. Also, all CE IVDs will have to be registered in a central medical device database called EUDAMED. This database is under construction. They are also working on official guidance documents. The MDCG, the Medical Device Coordination Group, is responsible for drafting and publishing these guidance documents. Finally, the national competent authorities are preparing for enforcement of the regulation, as they are responsible for enforcing the regulation and performing inspections at manufacturers, notified bodies, and laboratories. And finally, the diagnostic laboratories. In the next videos, we'll look into the use of in-house devices by diagnostic labs, the IVDR requirements for in-house devices, and discuss how diagnostic labs can prepare for the IVDR.